First job, coffee. Now on to the Scania, the new Scania. So need to kind of get this out of the way for my daughter, and then she can start playing with this. So last night started just tinkering about and basically doing bits and bats to the truck which are technically a duplicate. So once you've added that stuff onto one chassis rail, you then have to repeat that and do exactly the same on another chassis rail. And it's exactly the same either side, apart from one of these brackets is different on the chassis rail. So just watch out for that. However, they are both the same. So I thought it takes a little bit of time out of the videos, but it's repetitive stuff that you really don't need to see. Take the shock absorbers for instance. There's only 2 of these which are sprung and the other 4 are unsprung. So you don't need to see me build 6 shocks. So I've left 1 unsprung one and 1 sprung one to build, and the other 4 I've made up. So that way we can get the build right together quicker, and it also saves me some time in the editing and everything else, and then I can keep content flowing. Also this morning Mr. Mailman came with the bearings, so they were timed nicely because I was kind of getting worried that it might be tomorrow, but for this one I do want to get the main parts of the chassis constructed and put together, and I'll just carry on filming and working through and getting the gearbox and the axles built up and stuff like that. More fiddly stuff, so that can go into another video, but for this one I do want to get this chassis together. So there's stuff everywhere, but it's like organised chaos that I know what's what, I know what's where, and I know what I'm working with. If you were going off the manual, you would be starting with your servo savers, and that bit's relatively easy, as is the rest of the kit, to be honest with you. But if you're a noob and you've never built one before, just carefully study that, because it is likely that you will be using that servo saver and the actual setup of the servos within this truck. So next you would be moving on to part 2, which is actually constructing a mount for the servo to go in, and that would normally sit on the side of the chassis. However, I won't be using that, and nor will I be using these alloy ones either. So at the moment, to me, those are surplus, but could well be used in something else later down the line. Now, the reason I don't want to use that is my daughter doesn't need 3 speeds in the gearbox, which I probably will swap out to a lesser planetary at some point. Just then it's in a nice 1 gear and it just crawls nice for her. You've got fast, faster, and just absolutely pointless for these trucks. So that's totally unnecessary for her. Now this one will be the shifting servo. That was in fact the steering servo, which I'm doing away with. And as I'll be locking the gearbox, I will show you that later down the line. I'll be putting the steering servo where the shifting servo goes, up central at the front of the chassis. So I don't need to build up all the bracket and everything else to control the servo from the side of the chassis and all the linkages down to the front anyway. So cutting that out of there. But once that's out of the way, you're then on to part 3, and this is technically where I have already started here. I did it on the opposite rail to the manual, so I can show you the rail in the manual. Just then you kind of get the gist of how that's going together. So here you can see a little spanner. Here I have a little wrench. These come in your little Tamiya toolkits, and they are just one handy little tool. Like I say, I've attached the mounts as the rear part of the front suspension there, the hangers, the front hangers, and we have the suspension mount there, and also, which looks to have come from the Tamiya Grand Hauler design, they have bump stops on here, which will in fact limit your travel of your rear suspension. Now, I don't think Leon will be going off-road with this truck anytime soon. She might drive it up the park and drive it round the streets. So the bump stops should be no issue whatsoever. So it's optional if you want to run them. If you want a bit of travel and a bit more play in your suspension, then take them off. So your parts, all your plastic parts, they can be found on parts trees, and they have little bits on the trees. Right there, you'll find the emblem, and then you'll have A, B, C, D, or E, or F, whatever tree that is, and then that'll coordinate to your part. So for example, C5, you would look for your parts tree C, and then look for part 5, which are numbered at the side of the parts. So that's pretty simple to follow. As far as the metal parts and the metal bags go, these are all scale and life size. So should I put this up to there, it's the same size. And should I wish to measure a screw, just to make sure, they are the same size. So you can't go wrong. They are a perfect guide as to what you're using. And this is normally in metal parts bags. I like to lay all these out into tubs and just work as I go. You do get thread lock in there. I won't be using it everywhere that it states to use thread lock, but I will be using it in areas, but I want other parts just to be able to come on and off at the minute, just to make it easier to upgrade and for paint. So they're labelled left and right, L and R on the chassis rails, and you'll find that to the front of the chassis rail, and it'll read the correct way. So that is the correct way. This is the front, that's the rear. So first we've got front damper stay. Just screwing into there. Normally I have cutting mats to work on, but they're all a bit occupied with the tank behind me at the moment. So I do apologise anyone that tunes in for that. But as I said, this is kind of my priority at the moment for my little girl. So this is a little bit of plastic. It's off one of the parts trees. And this is just going to act as like a bushing, a spacer for your front hanger, which goes together like so. And then you get one of these, which actually you're going to get not a tapped screw, but a self-tapping screw. And the self-tappers will go into the backs of that, and that will act as like a clamp or your nuts. And this one's going to the front of the chassis. Let's lock that one in there. So next will be the rear part of the hanger, and taking one of these, again, more little bushings and stuff. And I have also gone over every part I've taken away from the parts tree where it's been cut off, cleaned all that up with a file, so everything's just nice and smooth. So this is going to bolt on top of the side skirt bracket, and this is going to want to be put in place first really. So, and just make sure that where you're bolting in, that part is pointing to the front. So if it's sticking out that way, that's the front. Like so. If it's facing that way, it's the wrong way around. Those little bracket bits want to be on the bottom. Now we need a little lock nut, because this is going to bolt onto the back of there with a little lock nut using the little Tamiya spanner provided. Now the rear side skirt bracket, and again that wants to be facing forwards, and that's just going to bolt up here. I've got little hobby drills, screwdrivers. I just don't use them. I don't know why. Just a bit old school, I think. Happy screwing away. I know I could save so much time now and just zzz this in there, but so now what we have is something like that. So now on to step 4. I've got parts for that here, all cleaned up, ready to go. The chances I could be swapping this out for a different one for Leyland, because I'm putting that in there. So I'll still show you how that goes together, and then it all fits in the same as the one that's built up there. And same with the rear cross member. I will show you, but she does have one built up. They are exactly the same, it's just one's metal, one's plastic. Now this step I've already done. Literally just 2 tapping screws in the back just to hold that tank in between that cross member. So this part, using 4 tapping screws again. Remember to check the sizes that they're wanting you to use. In this case, the 3x8s. So you would just scout that against your little graph thing here, and 3x8, it's a match, so you're working with that one. And all we're doing is just one in each corner there. That's going to be held in place with the rear suspension brackets and stuff, just like that, minus the chassis rail. So now onto the rear cross member, exactly the same, couple of tapping screws. You want your left and your right sections, and you'll have a cross member that looks like that, like a V. And that just goes together again with 2 self tappers, one at either side. Like I say, that won't be being used, know that now, so I'll just pop them in there. So now moving on to putting the chassis together and closing it together with the various parts that we've just put together, like these. Like I say, I will be replacing these, so ignore the parts that's going in. They're exactly the same, just metal, not plastic. This is actually a shifting servo, and it would be linked to a rod to your gearbox, so you can shift through the 3 speeds. So as I won't be using the servo, as I said, on the side, this is where I'll be placing my steering servo, which leaves that section out of it for me. So that part's, if you are looking how to build that, I've probably got that in another video, in another build video somewhere, but I won't be building that up in this one. However, I will be moving on to the axles. That's where the servo would sit, on the side of the chassis. Right, I've just got the bits and bobs needed now for the chassis here, so we'll get these in place. Now I have constructed the little servo mount, so that's also ready to go into place now on the chassis. And now we're basically just going to be doing step 5, just adding all this and then it basically puts the chassis together. And then another little extra bit there, which I guess is optional and down to your preference, is the bump stops. I'm going to have them. I like them for keeping that ride smooth, especially where she's going to be using it. They ain't going to be anywhere rough where she's going to need that like suspension flex and stuff. So I have kept one of those out to make, and they are all the same. They go together the same way. They just fit slightly different, but it's self-explanatory. So self-tapping screws all the way for this bit. So I have the rear to me, and I'm going to be starting here. So the first thing is I'm going to be replacing that plastic one. So I don't need self-tappers for this. However, I do have the screws, correct like hardware provided there. So they are exactly the same. As I said, one metal, one plastic. Taking the rear of the chassis rail. In your case, you'll be using self-tappers. So the next piece of the puzzle, like from the back, would be the this part here. Again, I won't be using self-tappers. I'm going to have to use my own hardware on that. But this is just basically a metal version of that. The only difference is self-tappers into the plastic and threaded screws into the threaded holes there on the metal one. So we're going to need the rear suspension plates as well. They're going to bolt there like so, but they're also going to attach that centerpiece. There I have some 3x10s. Those are what I recommended as the self-tappers, so we'll go with the 3x10 in there. Suspension plate. There's no front or back, it's the same either side. But you can see the holes aren't tapped, but they will thread into there, so that will technically lock them in place. The next one on the opposite side. The bump stops I have already put in place there, as you can see. Now there is a lip. As long as you have the lip to the inside of the rail and the actual rubber bump stop to the outside, you can't go wrong. So the next piece, we will be wanting this cross member, which is F1 off your parts tree. And the ridge wants to be going along the top, like so. Now you want the cross member with the tank and the arc part to the bottom, and that'll be going in your next set of double holes, which are vertical, which will be there. Same again, 2 self-tappers, and moving to the front cross member, and you'll notice there's like a separate lip on your cross member. That part goes to the bottom, and the top part you'll have another lip, but it will look like a T-piece lip rather than just a long rectangular lip. Your mounting holes are sat more toward the top as well, so you can also use that as a guide. And they'll just sit in the front there. Again, self-tappers. So now you have your front and rear and central cross members in place. Now to attach the little servo bracket. So coming up to the front of your chassis, down here, I'm going to be using those two holes and going from underneath like so. I'm just going to tap those into place. Now your chassis is looking like this, all we're going to do next is basically repeat what you've done on the outside of this chassis rail. Close them together, and like I say, as you've done, bolt everything up in the existing holes. So I'll get that bit done now and come back to you in a moment. So now with both chassis rails on, your chassis should be looking thereabout like this. Ignore the colour of the servo, they're all various, but that is the start of life for a Tamiya truck, and that's what all these semis are built on, that basic platform. They vary between the Euros and the Americans, but guaranteed every 6x4 you build of a Euro truck is just going to have that same chassis layout. So to try and prevent a bit of confusion with the video side of it, because we are now on to constructing like the axles and hanging the suspensions, the leaf springs and stuff like that. So as we've got the actual ladder completed, I thought we may as well leave that at that video. I can continue filming now and building up the suspension and everything else for the next video, but at least that way we can kind of break it down into sections. So we've got chassis, axle, suspension, whatever, but you get what I mean, don't you? Gearbox and then the cab, or whichever way it comes about being done. But yeah, so that is your ladder frame. Just a couple of changes there with the alloy upgrades, but yep, enjoying it. I think it's a pleasure to build because I know it's for my daughter and not myself, whereas if it were for me, I'd kind of find it as a chore building up another Scania, like here we go again. But with it being a different Scania and a new style of Scania, and because it's my daughter's first truck, I don't know, it's nice. It's nice to build her one. So anyway, thanks for watching that video. To stay tuned for more, if you're not already subscribed, then do hit the subscribe button. Ping the notification bell to stay notified. If it's just this build you're particularly interested in, then just look out for those notifications, ignore the rest. Don't forget to like the video, drop a comment down below, and I shall catch you all in the next video. And just before I leave, I would like to say a massive shout out to Time Tunnel Models, who got this here like way beyond quick time, super express delivery. So if you need any model requirements or anything for your models, go check out Time Tunnel Models down below. Ciao for now, guys. Oh.